He's not with us, the Earth liaison muttered, squinting up at the ridge as the wind tugged his cap sideways. The Galactic scout captain turned with a half-laugh, raising one brow under his chrome-plated visor. Then who in the stars just cracked a hole through my sergeant's helmet? The reply came not from the man but from the sound, an echoing thunderclap across the desert floor, like God had flicked a pebble through a canyon wall. The second scout didn't even fall. He just folded, armor clattering down like a puppet with its strings cut. And then silence. The kind of silence that tells you death isn't finished yet. 3 hours earlier, the aliens had landed with a smugness only Empire-born officers could master. Their drop ship had kicked up a sandstorm over the barren clay flats outside Sector 12, a testing range long since abandoned by Earth's militaries. But today, it had visitors. Lots of them. And every single one of them was laughing. The Galactic Scout Legion was known for its arrogance, but even by their standards, this was theatrical. Shiny armor gleamed in the desert sun. Drones hovered above them like glittering bugs. Jevrik, their leader, stood with his arms crossed, staring at the row of Earth-made rifles laid out on a makeshift table like they were museum pieces. He leaned in close to an old bolt-action rifle, squinting at the hand-etched numbers on its scope ring. "What is this, a doorstop?" he chuckled, tapping it with one clawed finger. "You humans really point this thing at enemies? Must be for intimidation only. Surely it doesn't fire." "It fires," came a calm voice behind him. The Earth liaison was an older man, worn jeans, sunglasses that didn't quite cover the bags under his eyes, and a mug in his hand that said, "I survived 5 peace treaties and 1 coffee shortage." He didn't smile. "But I'd suggest not standing in front of it." Jevrik snorted. "I'm more likely to get hit by a meteor than a human round from that thing." Another scout, a younger one, stepped forward, holding a sleek plasma carbine and gesturing with mock ceremony toward the old rifle. "Shall we test it? Set a target at, what's fair for Earth? 300 meters? Try 1200, said the liaison, sipping his coffee. Laughter broke out again. 1200? This thing couldn't hit a transport ship if it was parked in front of a barn. Behind them, a small warning beep chirped on a nearby sensor drone. Nobody paid it any mind. Just interference, they figured. Desert wind playing tricks. The liaison turned toward the distant ridgeline. He raised a hand slightly, 2 fingers tapping the side of his mug. Somewhere up there, hidden in a curtain of heat haze and rocky outcroppings, a man adjusted his position, pulled his breath, and slowly pressed his gloved finger against a worn trigger. The sound of the shot wasn't immediate. The result was, one of the scouts dropped hard, his helmet torn open with such violence that even the dust recoiled. The group froze. Then, a second shot, faster, sharper, almost impossibly timed, cracked the air, and another scout collapsed backward without so much as a twitch. The remaining 5 dove for cover, shouting in 2 languages, plasma rifles up, scanning wildly. Jevrik's face twisted, fury rising beneath his disbelief. "Where is he? How did he do that? Was that a drone? Cloaked sniper? Stealth beam?" The liaison didn't move. "He's using that doorstop you mocked. Shoots half-inch slugs. No beams. No tracking." Jevrik stood, stunned, as the liaison finally turned to him and added with a smirk. "And he's not with us." The surviving scouts activated drone support, deploying high-orbit surveillance and personal scanners. Every screen came up empty. Thermal was useless. Acoustic sensors gave them echoes from the rocks. One scout thought he caught movement near a ravine, fired a burst of plasma, and hit nothing but sand and a dead lizard. The sniper didn't need to move. Not yet. He had patience. The kind that came from decades spent watching targets breathe through grass. He adjusted for heat mirage, wind drift, and even accounted for the alien armor's curve. Another shot rang out, this time aimed for intimidation. The round struck a plasma rifle mid-barrel and snapped it clean in 2. It landed at Jevrik's feet. Lodged in the metal casing was a strip of paper, pierced cleanly by the bullet. Jevrik picked it up. It read in scrawled English, Run or learn. For a full second, nobody spoke. The aliens weren't used to threats. They were used to victories, parades, and polishing their gauntlets with oils made from conquered planets. They'd come to Earth expecting backward tech and fearful locals. But what they got was a ghost in the rocks. A man with no rank, no chain of command, and a rifle older than most of their starships. The liaison finally said. That one man just took down 2 of your elites, scared the rest, and he's got 5 more rounds before he needs to reload. Maybe you want to reconsider this assessment. Jevrick's jaw clenched. I want him dead. Bring in the hunter drone. The scouts hesitated. I said bring it in. They obeyed. Far above, in orbit, a stealth drone received the ping and began its descent. The liaison finished his coffee. You really think that'll help? Jevrick didn't reply. High above the ridge, the sniper lay prone in silence, watching the skies with an old mirror angled between 2 rocks. The mirror wobbled slightly in the wind. Reed shifted his rifle an inch to the left and began calculating the drone's velocity by watching the changing sun glare. One eye tracked the air shimmer. The other followed its descent path. He didn't need to see it. He just needed to know where it would pass through. His finger hovered near the trigger again. Earth's honor didn't need defending. But sometimes a rifle did. Jevrick's voice echoed off the rocks as he barked out coordinates and orders, but it was laced with something new, hesitation. He had never faced an enemy he couldn't see, let alone one that wasn't even moving. 2 of his men were down. Their suits, rated for ballistic resistance, had been cracked open like eggs. The others crouched behind rocks, rifles trembling in their hands as their scanners whirred uselessly. The drone hadn't found anything. The satellites couldn't lock a target. Even the air seemed hostile, dry and crackling like it carried an electric grudge. Somewhere out there, a man with an ancient rifle had just humiliated an interstellar scout unit. That didn't happen. Ever. Down below, the Earth liaison stood perfectly still, arms folded, boots in the dust. He wasn't smug. He was just waiting. That annoyed Jevrick more than the gunfire. Waiting implied confidence. Patience. Like the Earth man knew how this would end and was just letting it play out. Jevrick spat into the dirt, turned back to his men, and ordered a full deployment of seeker drones. Grid the ridge. Thermal, acoustic, particle sweep. Scan for heartbeats. Something. One scout flinched as a gust of wind blew through a rocky arch. No shot this time. But now they were reacting to the breeze. It had gone from a test to a hunt. From a hunt to a psychological game. And the sniper wasn't even speaking. He didn't need to. His silence was the loudest thing on the field. About a kilometer away, the sniper known only as Reed blinked once and slowly shifted his position by half an inch. He didn't move fast. He didn't need to. Every movement was calculated. A single ripple of fabric, a subtle breath shift, a quiet click of a scope dial. He had memorized the terrain 3 days before the aliens even landed. Dug in just after sunset, fed by ration paste and cooled by a homemade ground pipe system. They were scanning for movement, not shadow. Not intention. That's why he was invisible. Reed wasn't active military anymore. He'd burned out of that world 10 years ago, but his skills hadn't gone soft. If anything, retirement had honed them sharper. He'd been a ghost long before the word ever trended in Black Ops chatter. Officially, he didn't exist anymore. No chain of command. No leash. The government didn't even assign him a mission. They just made sure he knew where to be, and then looked the other way. Unofficially, this test was bait. Reed was the hook. Back at base, the Earth liaison was now leaning against the hood of a battered transport truck, watching as the alien scouts fanned out. Jevrick had deployed nearly everything but a full orbital bombardment. Plasma rifles out. Drones circling. And still, nothing. One of the scouts cursed loudly in his native tongue, slamming a scanner into the ground. "This is a joke," he snapped. "There is no way one human with a museum rifle can just vanish." The liaison gave him a sidelong glance. He didn't vanish. He just never needed to be seen. One of the drones finally picked up something, heat, faint, possibly a mammal. A scout pounced on the signal and launched a tracking beam. It locked, painted a target, and 2 plasma shots ripped into the hillside. Rocks exploded. Dust rolled. The beam flickered and died. The signal was gone. Then a metallic clink echoed. Something rolled into the middle of the scout formation. They froze. It was a shell casing, an old brass one. Scratched along the side were 3 words, etched in rough strokes. "Try again, rookies." The scout nearest to it stepped back like it was a live grenade. Jevrik stared at it, fuming. "He's playing with us. This is psychological warfare. We need to escalate." The liaison sighed. "That's exactly what he wants." Jevrik ignored him. He activated a call beacon. "Authorization Jevrik 067. Deploy Hunter Drone 1. Set combat mode to elimination." The confirmation tone buzzed in. In orbit, the drone detached silently from its rig. It dropped with near-invisible propulsion, using gravitational compression to cloak its entry. Fast, quiet, efficient, designed to incinerate enemy snipers before they knew they were being hunted. It had eliminated threats on 5 different worlds. No one ever escaped it. No one ever even saw it. Reed already knew it was coming. He felt the wind shift. The pressure drop. The air got thinner by the second. He turned the mirror angle slightly, watching the shimmer in the sky. No need for visuals. He tracked shadows and particle trails. His fingers moved gently over the rifle's bipod. He wasn't aiming for the body. He was aiming for the intake valve. Just like in the training years ago. Every machine had a flaw. You just had to wait for the right moment. The drone streaked overhead like a silent banshee. For a split second, its lower panel reflected the sun. Reed held his breath. Adjusted for angle, wind, and distance. Squeezed. Not pulled. Never pulled. The rifle thundered. The round didn't just hit, it tore. It bored through the weak thermal panel just as the drone banked, turning the air itself into a brief ripple of heat and chaos. Then the drone stuttered, sparked, and came crashing down with a hiss, tumbling like a dying comet into the sand far below. The explosion was controlled. Reed had aimed to disable, not destroy. Let them see it fail. Let them feel it. Jevrik screamed in disbelief. His prize hunter drone, down by a 50-year-old rifle and 1 shot. He turned on the Earth liaison, fuming. "Who trained that man?" The liaison didn't blink. "No one you'd understand." Jevrik paced, furious. "This isn't a test anymore. This is war." "No," said the liaison quietly. "This is Earth." The remaining scouts huddled around their last functioning console, trying to get any readout. One of them was muttering to himself, clearly cracking under pressure. Another one pulled a small field tablet and began checking for updates on his suit's systems. They were a mess. The silence was getting louder. Every noise, every shift of sand or flap of cloth, made them flinch. Above them, Reed watched. No shot this time. He didn't need one. The damage was done. He marked their new positions, updated the terrain in his head. He saw Jevrik walking toward the crashed drone. Saw him kneel to examine it. And smiled. He wasn't done yet. Jevrik stood over the smoldering wreckage of the hunter drone, his reflection warped in its melted casing. His fists clenched so tightly his armored gloves creaked. The drone had been the ace up his sleeve, the unstoppable ghost killer. Now it was nothing more than a twisted heap of ruined tech, dropped by a single bullet from a man who wasn't even wearing armor. He turned slowly, scanning the barren stretch of desert behind him, as if somehow the sniper might be standing there, arms folded, grinning. But there was only the wind and the rising heat waves off the rocks. The surviving scouts gathered in a tight perimeter, nervous, quiet, one of them whispering prayers in a dialect Jevrik didn't recognize. These were not soldiers used to loss. They were used to training simulations and controlled engagements. They had no idea how to handle an enemy they couldn't see. The plasma rifles they carried might as well have been sticks for all the good they'd done. Worse still, they were now pinned down with no transport, one drone left, and no tactical edge. Their morale was cracking like the dry earth beneath them. The Earth liaison had moved to sit in the shade of the transport, now watching the scene through a pair of old binoculars. He adjusted the focus and spotted Jevrik waving his arms at a scout, who was frantically tapping at a screen. Whatever plan they were trying to launch, it wasn't working. The tech was too advanced for the terrain. The dust fried circuits. The heat warped infrared. Everything they relied on in other worlds was useless here. That was the difference. Earth didn't build warriors who relied on perfect conditions. Earth built ghosts from dirt, bullets, and stubbornness. Reed shifted positions again, but only slightly. He didn't want them to know he'd moved. His rifle nestled against the rocks like it had grown from them. He scanned each scout in turn, noting their gear, their stances, the way they scanned the horizon, but never once looked directly into the sun where his angle would have made the most sense. They were thinking like aliens. Not like prey. That would change soon enough. He chambered another round, this time aiming not at a body but at their armored transport's fuel pod. Not to detonate. Just to make a point. The shot cracked across the valley, and the vehicle jumped an inch off the ground as the round slammed into its side, punching a hole that hissed vapor for 5 full seconds before sealing. The scouts panicked again, diving for cover even though the shot hadn't hit any of them. The transport was now crippled. They were trapped. Reed didn't want them dead. He wanted them off balance, questioning every step, every move. He was building pressure, not just tactically but psychologically. Jevrik shouted orders again, voice cracking. One scout tried to flank the ridgeline, climbing over the slope to find an angle. He didn't make it halfway before a bullet kicked up dust directly in front of his foot. He stumbled back, wide-eyed, crawling until he was behind the others again. He didn't speak. He just shook his head. No one tried to flank after that. Reed waited. 2 minutes passed. Then 5. Silence. He let it settle like a fog. Let them think maybe he had left, maybe he had to relocate, maybe they were finally free to move. Jevrik grabbed a signal flare, snapped it, and shoved it into the dirt. A bright blue trail of smoke poured up into the sky. A call for extraction. Desperation, plain and simple. Reed didn't stop him. That was part of the plan. Let them call for help. Let them think help was coming. Because help, when it did arrive, would not be the kind they expected. Several kilometers east, Unit Zulu 7 was already in motion. For Earth's Special Forces operatives in light recon suits, dropped by low-profile air glide insertion, silent and fast. They were briefed before landing. No engagements unless directly targeted. This was Reed's operation. They were backup, nothing more. Their boots barely left footprints. Their eyes scanned from under cloaked visors. Each one carried a different weapon, but none were drawn. They didn't need to be. Reed hadn't missed in hours. Jevrik paced behind the wrecked drone, muttering to himself. His pride was bleeding. Everything about this mission had turned to ash. What was supposed to be a weapons assessment to justify further planetary expansion had become a humiliation he'd never lived down. He looked at the Earth liaison again and stormed toward him. You're orchestrating this. Admit it. The liaison raised one brow. Me? No. I'm just here to witness. Like you? Jevrik snarled. Then who is he? What is he? The liaison's smile was dry and faint. He's just a man with a rifle. That answer didn't sit well with Jevrik. He turned and began ranting about violations of engagement protocol, how Earth would be reported to the Galactic Council, how this test had become an assassination attempt. The liaison didn't even flinch. He just pulled a small notepad from his back pocket, jotted something down, and muttered, "You can complain later. Right now you should focus on surviving the next few hours." Another sound interrupted them. Not a gunshot. Not a drone. Footsteps. The scouts spun, raising rifles, sensors flashing. From the west, a figure walked toward them through the haze. Not fast. Not armed. But cloaked. The heat shimmer made it hard to see at first. But as the shape approached, the aliens realized it wasn't Reed. It was someone else. Another human. Zulu 7's forward scout. She stopped just within rifle range, lifted a hand, and then with perfect calm, threw a small metallic object into the sand between them. It hissed, split open, and deployed a 3D map of the area. On it, each alien position was marked. So was Reed's. None of them could see where he was on the field. But the map showed it. Every position. Every move they'd made. Every mistake. The scout finally spoke. Not a threat. Just a phrase. You were never hunting him. He was hurting you. The map blinked once, then shut down. The scout turned and walked away. The aliens were stunned into silence. Jevrik just stood there, mouth slightly open, eyes twitching. He looked again toward the ridgeline, but there was nothing. Just dust. Just wind. Just earth. He'd never felt so exposed in his life. He didn't understand how one man could do this. But deep down, a darker truth was settling in. It wasn't just one man. It was a planet. And it wasn't laughing anymore. Reed exhaled slowly and laid still, cheek pressed against the warm rock, the scent of sun-baked stone and gun oil mixing beneath his nose. Through the scope, he watched Jevrik's every twitch, every angry gesture, every time his boots kicked up dust out of frustration. The Galactic Scout Commander was unraveling, and Reed didn't need to fire another shot to prove it. The man had stepped into Earth expecting savages and slingshots. Now he was standing in the middle of a death trap set by a man using a rifle older than his entire starship crew combined. That kind of failure didn't just bruise pride, it shook foundations. The perimeter the scouts had set was collapsing. Half of them had shut down their scanners completely because they were now convinced it only made them more visible. The others argued in hushed tones about whether to retreat to the dropship or wait for extraction. One even quietly suggested that maybe Earth had been holding back, that the backwater planet had elite assassins living in caves, bred for war. The others didn't laugh. Not anymore. Reed's fingers tapped once on the rifle stock, a small rhythm to help keep time. The sun was dropping now, dragging shadows long across the rocks. The heat shimmer gave way to a deeper chill as the desert prepared for nightfall. That meant thermal visibility for the aliens would spike again. But that also meant Reed could start moving without leaving signature trails. His next step didn't involve another bullet. It involved fear. He reached for the small pack behind him and retrieved an old device. Not alien, not high-tech. Just a simple emitter. One he had tuned to mimic the frequency of the Galactic Scout helmets. When he flicked it on, it didn't broadcast to the world. It broadcast to their ears. One voice. One message. On loop. You are being watched. You are being marked. It came through every helmet with perfect clarity. A few scouts tore their headsets off immediately, spinning in circles. Others froze. Reed waited, then activated the second device. A pulse trigger that lit up a ring of harmless infrared markers in the dirt around them. Only visible through their optics. Suddenly, they were inside a perfect circle of red. No shots fired. Just psychological design. One scout fell to his knees, breathing heavily, muttering in his own language. Another fired wildly into the ridge. Nothing answered. Jevrik slammed a boot against a rock and shouted enough. He ripped the headset off and hurled it. He grabbed one of his lieutenants by the collar and snarled, "We are leaving. Now." But the moment they moved toward the old transport, a deafening blast erupted nearby. Not a bullet. An explosive charge. Non-lethal, but violent enough to throw two scouts backward, scraping armor against shale. Smoke poured across the field. The air was filled with confusion, panic, shouting. Reed had planted the charges 2 days ago, not as lethal traps, but as directional tools. He wanted them funneled. Herded. Into a specific position. He had studied their psychology. How they reacted under pressure. What panic did to well-trained but inexperienced scouts. It didn't break them. It pushed them. They ran straight toward the dry basin, the lowest part of the range, the place Reed had marked for them. As they scrambled downhill, trying to regroup, another set of traps activated. This time it was sonic. A low-pitched hum that grew louder with every step they took. Their suits amplified it, trying to interpret the signal. It overwhelmed their sensors. One scout ripped off his helmet, screaming. 2 others began shouting that they were surrounded. They weren't. Not yet. But they would be. Reed didn't fire a single shot during any of it. He just watched. Took notes. Adjusted calculations. This wasn't war. This was education. And Earth was the teacher. Far above, Zulu 7 remained in position. Watching. Tracking. Ready. But they didn't interfere. Reed hadn't asked for it. Their job was simple. Confirm outcomes. Ensure the game ended the way it was meant to. Quietly. Efficiently. Without intergalactic incident, but with undeniable dominance. Jevrik, now dragging one of his injured scouts by the arm, finally reached the basin's edge. He signaled the dropship for emergency extraction. The reply came back delayed. The atmospheric interference was growing worse, not because of Earth's weather, but because of the jammers Reed had planted. Communication would only get through if he allowed it. The scout commander dropped to one knee and panted hard, helmet gone, eyes bloodshot. He looked up into the hills, squinting against the fading sun. Somewhere out there, that sniper was still watching. Still aiming. He wanted to scream. Challenge him. Demand a face-to-face. But he knew how it would go. He'd speak, and in the time it took to breathe, the man would end it. That's when Reed made his move. He stood up. He walked out of the rocks. No cover. No cloak. Just a man with a rifle slung across his back and a calm, unreadable expression. The scouts raised their rifles. Reed stopped walking. Stared. Didn't blink. Didn't speak. He just waited. The Earth liaison called out from below, "Don't. Not unless you want him to prove his point again." Slowly, the rifles lowered. Reed kept walking, boots crunching over gravel and shattered stone. He passed one of the broken drones, knelt beside it, and picked up a small chip from the wreckage. Studied it. Turned it in his hand. Then let it fall again. Jevrik stood slowly, rage and disbelief crawling across his face. "You're just one man," he growled. Reed tilted his head slightly, then glanced back at the sniper's nest behind him. The homemade camouflage. The lens reflection set into rocks. The dummy rifle he'd left behind for misdirection. He looked back at Jevrik. "Just one man," he repeated, his voice quiet and even. Jevrik couldn't reply. Not when the sound of rotor blades started to hum in the distance. A sleek, black Earth transport descended just over the horizon. It landed behind the ridgeline. Reed didn't board it. He just nodded once toward it, then turned and walked back the way he came, vanishing once again into the landscape like he'd never been there at all. The liaison stepped up beside Jevrik, who was still frozen. "One bullet," he said softly. "That's all he needed to dismantle your unit." Jevrik turned, eyes hollow. "Who is he?" The liaison shrugged. "Depends on who you ask. But here on Earth, we just call him the last man you want to see when you're wrong." The sun dipped beneath the horizon, casting long purple shadows over the scorched basin as the last of the Galactic scout team boarded their transport. No words were spoken between them. Jevrik sat slumped in the corner, visor off, gauntlets loose, staring at the floor like it might open up and swallow him. The smell of scorched metal, sweat, and ozone hung in the air. Even the pilot avoided eye contact. The ship's engines rumbled to life and began the slow ascent toward the orbital cruiser, carrying back what had started as a display of dominance and ended in humiliation. High above Earth, in the silence of the mothership, the council of observers watched the footage. Every step of the engagement had been recorded, down to the last breath the sniper took before each shot. When the first scout fell, they thought it was a glitch. When the drone went down, they assumed sabotage. But by the time Reed walked out of the rocks unchallenged, the entire room had gone silent. Not one alien official spoke during the playback. They watched a man with an outdated rifle dismantle a team of technologically superior soldiers without ever being seen until the end. The last seconds of the footage showed Reed walking away, boots leaving almost no prints, body fading into the land like it had always belonged there. When the video stopped, the lights came up slowly. A senior galactic strategist finally broke the silence. "This cannot go public." "Too late," said a younger observer, pulling up another screen. "It's already leaked." The video was already spreading through the underbelly of the galactic networks, first on military forums, then on civilian feeds. The title was short, brutal, and unforgettable. Earth's Rifleman. The comments flooded in, some calling it faked, others demanding to know how a human weapon could defeat scout-grade armor. Memes exploded. One man. One bullet. One planet. It was the fastest spreading footage since the orbital crash over Cerealian Prime. The worst part for the Galactic Command wasn't the footage itself. It was what it meant. Earth wasn't to be underestimated anymore. On the planet, the Earth liaison sipped coffee at the edge of the transport landing zone, watching the dust settle where the scout ship had lifted off. Zulu 7 had already exfiltrated, leaving no trace they'd ever been there. Reed, of course, had long vanished. No one needed to ask where he'd gone. It didn't matter. He always resurfaced when he was needed. Never earlier. Never late. In a small cabin nestled deep in the mountains, Reed sat by the fire, boots off, rifle propped up beside him. His hands moved with methodical ease as he cleaned the bolt, wiped the scope, and checked the bore for flecks of grit. It wasn't about routine. It was about respect. This rifle, this tool that others mocked as primitive, had just rewritten the pecking order of an entire galactic hierarchy. But Reed didn't smile. Didn't even flinch. He wasn't interested in medals or declarations. He had no rank. No allegiance to agencies anymore. He was, simply, Earth's answer to arrogance. A log cracked in the fireplace. Outside, coyotes howled. Reed leaned back in his chair, eyes closed, listening. His body ached from staying prone too long. His shoulders still felt the thump of every shot. But it wasn't pain he carried, it was satisfaction. He hadn't just proven a point. He had drawn a line. There would be more visitors. Of that he was sure. But they'd come differently now. Less armored. Less smug. And far more cautious. Back on the galactic cruiser, Jevrik was undergoing his official debriefing. He sat in a sealed room, facing a tribunal of high command officers, most of whom had never set foot on Earth. Their questions came sharp and fast. What happened to the drones? Why didn't you eliminate the target? Why didn't you detect him sooner? Jevrik answered each one with a tightening voice, but eventually he gave up. It wasn't tech failure. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't even the terrain. He looked each commander in the eye and said the one truth none of them wanted to hear. We didn't understand Earth. There was silence again. One of the commanders leaned forward. Then tell us what Earth really is. Jevrik thought of the ridgeline, the silence before each shot, the mockery on their faces that turned into fear, and the way Reed had walked through their lines like a shadow. He looked down, then replied, Earth is a sniper's world. That answer spread just as fast as the video did. Within days, planets previously considering expansion toward the Sol system paused their plans. Research stations began requesting new defense protocols. A council subcommittee proposed adding Earth to the list of restricted combat zones, not because of its technology, but because of its unpredictability. They labeled it level gray, low-tech, high-threat. Some worlds laughed. Others watched the footage again, slower this time, zooming in on the way Reed moved, calculating every angle. What disturbed most of them wasn't the kill shots. It was the patience. The discipline. The restraint. He had never fired more than necessary. He had let them run. Let them think. Let them feel cornered. And then let them leave. No bloodbath. Just control. In a small workshop near the edge of a forgotten town, a human engineer printed a photo from the mission. It wasn't of Reed's face. There were none. It was of the drone he shot, cracked open and half buried in the sand. The photo had one line etched underneath it in a frame. Welcome to Earth. The frame went up in a pub, next to medals and old war photos, where veterans would nod and raise a drink without needing to say a word. Back in the mountains, Reed set the bolt back into the rifle, clicked it in place, and looked out the window. The stars were just starting to show. Somewhere up there, satellites were probably watching. Commanders were debriefing. Reports were being written. And debates were raging about what kind of species humans really were. He didn't care. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a case of old cartridges, each one marked from a different operation. On the bottom of the most recent round, he scratched a simple phrase with the tip of his knife. Galactic Scout. One click. He placed the bullet in a separate row. Then he shut the drawer, picked up his coat, and stepped outside into the night, the cold air wrapping around him like a second skin. The world was quiet again. And Reed, Earth's quietest answer, walked into the dark with nothing but patience in his veins and a loaded rifle slung across his shoulder.